בזכות הצדיק רבי חיים פינטו, בזכות רבי שלמה פינטו, and today it's הילולה. הקדוש ברוך הוא, first of all, bless the צדיק רבי יהודה and בעלת הבית, with ברכה נצלחה, סייעתא דשמיא הגדולה, מה קדמנו וכתבתי כתב, בעזרת השם הקדוש ברוך הוא ספר לנו שפע עד בלידי, may this house hear the voice of כל ששון וכל שמחה, כל חתן וכל כלה, and may בעזרת השם all their prayers be accepted ברצון, and may we all get invited to many שמחות that they will בעזרת השם be celebrating very soon בעזרת השם. As well as for all the tzaddikim and tzaddikot that are here, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless all of you with all the blessings. May you Be'ezrat Hashem see the hand of Hashem in your life, and may we all come to a place of being redeemed on a personal level, that we all need redemption, and on a level for all Klal Yisrael. Amen. You know, Batai, right now, we are approaching Pesach, and we can't help ourselves but think of the opportunity that this holiday offers. Pesach, the Zohar HaKadosh says, it is our chance, our window, in which we are most likely going to be redeemed. Where Zohar HaKadosh says, out of every single day in the year, the most likely date for a Geula, for a redemption, is Pesach. When we think about Pesach, we can't help but think about what it was like to come all together to Yerushalayim as a nation. When people go to Eretz Israel, they get inspired, they feel like they're around their family, they really feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. This was at a much higher level. It was every single Jew, from every single corner of the world, coming together in Bet Hamikdash, in one building, seeing each other, the celebrations that happened. The Gemara says, a person that didn't see the celebrations that happened in Bet Hamikdash never saw what celebration looks like in his entire life. To see that spirituality, to see that purification, to see that excitement, to see that unity that existed, we can't help ourselves but be so jealous and desire it so much. But you know, Batai, when we think about this idea of Geula and how Bet HaMikdash looked at the time when it was built and how Pesach looked at this period of time, we come to a very disturbing reality. And I think it's a thought that no one asked themselves. And I think it's a thought that will give us a big awakening on our situation versus other situations, and how our situations are actually not that different. We can all close our eyes for a moment and think about what it was like to be in Bet HaMikdash, what it was like to prepare for Pesach. We arrived to this holy date, the date that the Geula is most likely to come, and Bnei Yisrael were praying for something very familiar. They were coming in front of Bet HaMikdash, in front of Kodesh Kodeshim, and they're saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, this year, bring a Geula. Please, Hashem, this year, bring Mashiach. Bring Tchiyat HaMetim. I want to see my great-grandparents. I want to see Moshe Rabbeinu. I want to see all the 600,000 Jews that left Egypt. Hashem, make this year be the year that we will all celebrate Mashiach Tzidkenu. And when we think of that, we come to a very odd reality. And that is that what Bnei Israel were praying for at the time when Bet HaMikdash was built is the exact same thing that what we are praying for now. We're praying for Geula. We're looking at Pesach as a chance for redemption. We are all looking to take our troubles out of our life. We are all looking to live lives that Hashem will just be completely dwelling within every aspect of our life. We are praying for the exact same thing. So if that's the case, we can come to a place of even questioning what we think of how Geula is supposed to look like, or really what Geula is. So in Abu Tayyib, today I was thinking that maybe it's a good idea and an important concept to understand really what was this idea of Bet HaMikdash. And how does it differ for today's day, that we don't have Bet HaMikdash, we are here in the exile in Los Angeles, and we don't live with this beacon of what seems to be like redemption. So now, we're thinking about this idea of House of Hashem. Ironically or coincidentally, we're entering into a very jam-packed period of speaking about Bet HaMikdash. And that is that this week, we're going to be reading the book of Vayikra, and we're going to be reading for a few more Torah portions all the process and the techniques and the ways of doing sacrifices, and how the Bet HaMikdash and how the Mishkan would function on a day-to-day basis. It's very funny that even amongst Rabbanim, there's like these jokes. That Rabbanim say once Vaikra comes in, they get very stressed. Because there's nothing to talk about. Once you enter the months of Vaikra, all the parashot discuss the exact same thing. And that is all the process of sacrifices and all the little details that occurred with those sacrifices in Bet Hamikdash. So when we're thinking about this, we can come to the realization that maybe these Torah portions are actually a good awakening in the preparation for the Chag of Pesach. And reminded us of a question that every year we ask ourselves. And it's the question about Bet Hamikdash itself. When we think about Bet Hamikdash as a people, we refer to it as the house of Hashem. Bet Hashem. When you think of a house, you think of a house like this one. Warm, loving, full of nice cushions, nice chairs, welcoming, a lot of happiness, a very light energy that surrounds a person when he enters into it. A home is a place that you enter in order to live a comfortable existence, a comfortable state. If we look at Bet Hamikdash, which is the house of Hashem, we see something quite different. Bet Hamikdash, almost all its activities were around one thing, and that is what? Sacrifices. So throughout the year, we always ask the same question, and that is, if the house of Hashem is really the house of Hashem, why is the house of Hashem a slaughterhouse? Where from the morning to the night, they were all doing one thing. Taking sheep, taking cows, taking goats, slaughtering one after the other. There's even midrashim that say that there was so much sacrifice that were brought in Bet Hamikdash that there was like rivers of blood that would come out from all those sacrifices. That's a house. And not just any house. That's the house of God. So there's two options. Either that's what God represents, blood and bloodshed and end of life, chas v'shalom, God forbid. Or this is how Hashem wants his house to look like. And if that's the case, at least explain what's the reason. Because there must be a reason behind how HaKadosh Baruch Hu's home was truly a house of sacrifices. So when we're thinking about this, it brought us to a very, very beautiful and deep Zohar that discusses HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire. We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is above limitation. He's above quantity, he's above size, he's above measurement. And so too, he's above desire. But the Zohar HaKadosh says there is one thing that Hashem really wants. And he doesn't just want in a way like, Tov, it would make me feel comfortable. He wants it, he desires it, he yearns for it. We would even go as far as saying, it's the one physical desire that Hashem has, like a lust. And that is what? The desire, when it says, Ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu, livnot dira batachtonim. He wanted a place which he will be able to rest and dwell within our world. Where if there is anything that Hashem truly wants from a physical perspective, is to be amongst us, to have a home, to have a place where he can rest, to have a place where he can dwell. Once we understand this concept of dira batachtonim, house of dwelling within our physical world, maybe it will give us a better idea of direction of understanding Bet Hamikdash. So what is really this idea of God's desire to be amongst us? The Zohar HaKadosh said something so simple. Hashem's desire to live within this world is just life. Where HaKadosh Baruch Hu desires nothing more than to see life growing, to see life flourishing, to see life continuing onwards. And we see this very present with the first mitzvah that Hashem asked from us as humans, which is Puruvu. Bring more children, grow, multiply. Zohar HaKadosh says, Hashem's desire of being amongst us is seeing life grow and flourish. Where Hashem's presence within the world is as simple as life itself. So we can all ask, where does this come from? How can we prove that Hashem is really this idea of life, of living, of growth, of renewal, of rebirth? So we always allude to an analogy that we gave one time to someone that was trying to challenge this idea of God's presence within the world. One time we were doing a class and there was an Israeli fellow. You know Israelis, they're fighters in their nature. He said, you know what, Rav? I have a question. It seems to be that to all the mitzvot and to all the questions that people are asking, there is answers. So I have a simple question. Prove to me that Hashem exists within our world. Prove to me that spirituality is present within our day-to-day life. And I think the analogy that was given to him is the most beautiful and simple analogy that can give us an understanding of Hashem's presence within our world. He said, when a person passes away, he just passes away, what's wrong with him? So a clever young boy, he said, his heart stopped. So I said, I have a simple solution. Take a pump, pull out his heart, replace the heart with a pump new blood into his system. Now what's missing? He said his lungs are not breathing. He said that's even easier. You can take a vacuum or whatever it is, an air filter, shove it down his throat, put new air in his lungs. No, now what's missing? He said, Rav, you're trying to make me say that he's missing a soul. He said, Tzaddik, I'm not trying to make you say anything. You naturally went to the fact that no matter what you will do to his body, he won't come back, because what gives him life is Hashem's presence. It's spirituality. It's the soul that lives within that body. So no matter what you will do, no matter how much tricks you will try to bring forward, he will never come back to life. Because it's not in your hands. What life is, Hashem's presence. And that is, I think, the most simple and easy way that we can all grasp this concept of a proof that Hashem is amongst us. And Hashem's form in which he takes is just life. That's why the opposite of Hashem's presence, evil, which he has a name, we call him Sama. It's one angel that controls all the negative things in our world. He's a man or an angel of many hats. And one of his hats is the angel of death. Why? Because his job is to push Hashem out of the world as much as possible. He's trying to make Hashem's presence lesser and lesser and lesser. So one of the jobs that he does, that he separates Hashem's presence from the body. And allows lack of godliness to exist within the world. And as a result of it exists what? Death, corrosion, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence within our world is just the desire to continue to live. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence within our world is just flourishment, continuation. That's what Hashem wants. He wants the world to continue to flourish. He wants life to continue to multiply. And he wants us as creations to notice that it's him behind life. And this is, Abotai, not an old thing that life was so ununderstood. Where until you think about it in that manner, it's unclear who was behind life. Zohar HaKadosh says that before the sin of Adam, before confusion took place within the world, it was even clear to the animals that the life that they share with one another was all just the presence of God, it was a spark of God. That's why it even says that the animals were all vegetarian. They said, how can I eat God? They saw that life is another piece of God. It even says that Adam was so abundant with Hashem's presence that every single one of his organs shined. What represents life within our world is simply HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what Hashem truly wants within us is to create a place in which we recognize him to be the entity behind that life. And once we recognize him to be that entity that gives us the breath that runs within our lungs, the blood that rushes between our veins, the life surround our livelihood that we eat, we breathe, that is how we place Hashem within our world. What Hashem really wants is just to allow him to be with us. He wants us to invite him into the world that he gave us. Hashem's goal and physical desire within this world is just to see the world strive, continue, and flourish. And to give him the recognition that he deserves for giving it all to us. That, Abotai, is building a home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we thought about this, things started to click in our mind. And this answered a question we've had for many years. And that is, it says in the Midrashim, that there were 10 miracles that happened in Hamikdash. Just to name some of them, It says that even though that they were slaughtering literally thousands of animals a day, there was never a fly that appeared. There was never a fly that appeared. There was never a smell of any sort of animal that was killed. It says the breads that they would bake, they would pull them out of the oven and they would stay fresh for eternity. But usually when you take bread out of the oven, it cools down, then it starts to dry up and stale and die. It would stay fresh for eternity. A mother that was pregnant entered into Hamikdash, never had a doubt of, God forbid, losing her child. And we always ask ourselves, we say, usually when you're naming a list of things that are trying to describe a place, that list needs to at least have common with one another. Just like you want to say, I went to this place, people are so nice. One person told me hello, the other person smiled at me, and one person was wearing red shoes. How does that have anything to do with what you're trying to prove? So when you're talking about Bet HaMikdash being such a special place, and then you mention 10 miracles, the 10 miracles need to have some sort of similarity with one another, but they seem to be all completely awkward and odd. We always ask, what's the connection between them? And we said, maybe we can say the connection is actually very, very simple. The connection is that the Bet HaMikdash was a place in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence got completely binded and connected with the physical world, in which it was unable to be separated. In what manner? In the manner that usually when an animal no longer has life, what happens? It starts to smell. It starts to rot. It becomes ugly to the eye to see. Bet HaMikdash was a place where the spirituality was so binded with the physical that it never smelled. That the characteristics of something that its spirituality, its life left it, never occurred. When you bake a piece of bread, you take it out of the oven. A new creation was formed while it was being baked. Heat allowed it to form. Life allowed it to make it what it is. You take it out. As that life dwindles, it starts to die. And then it gets dry and unedible. Maybe we can say Bet HaMikdash was a place where Hashem's presence was so obvious and so revealed that even the life that normally should have dwindled and left, and dryness and death should have fell upon that bread or meat or whatever it was, never happened. The bread stayed fresh. The life never left the physical. What Bet HaMikdash was, it was a place where Hashem's presence conquered the physical. We can see that even with the example of the woman. Where that there was no chance that Yetzer Hara, the evil that represents taking a life, could never come close to that woman. What Bet HaMikdash was, a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire to dwell took over and became the most present thing that occurred. Where Hashem was clearly behind the life that was within it. That even within the nature of the item, you saw Hashem's presence that was inseparable. But this doesn't answer the question of why Bet HaMikdash was a slaughterhouse. It answers a beautiful explanation of what Bet HaMikdash presented and the effect of items and the things that entered it and exited it, but doesn't answer why was the main job and task of Bet HaMikdash was taking animals and cutting them and taking life out of them. It seems contradictory to what we just said already. So now, a time when we're thinking on this idea, we thought of a beautiful concept. We always say in our classes that we are much more smart than we think. And I would even go as far as saying we have more of Hashem's thinking than we think. Where it's obvious, we're built in His image. So it would be very, very simple to think, but we also think a little bit like Him. Even in our slaying, we're able to identify that a person could change form, and two people can hold the completely different entitlements. So we can give you an analogy. It's like two people walk into the room. One person is clean, dressed nicely, holds himself very, very at a high standard, has honor, he is kind, very careful with the words that he says. Every single action is calculated. He is loving, he is grateful, he is honorable. In other words, he is a man that represents all the traits and all the attributes that we talk about on Hashem. When we look at that person, knowingly or unknowingly, even in a slang, we can look at him, and if we would like to describe him, how would we describe him? We would say, this man, he's a real man. He is an Adam. What does that mean, a real man? He is a real man. He is an Adam. What's an Adam? It's the original form of Adam. And the original form of Adam was the form of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This person resembles the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This person represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the exact same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu meant it from the beginning. He didn't just create us the way we look for no reason. From a design perspective, we're very badly designed. We have no teeth, we have no nails, we have no way to defend ourselves, we have no fur to protect ourselves, we have no scales. We're very poorly designed. No, not at all. We are designed in the image of God. We were brought to this world to represent Him in this world. We were brought to this world to carry His presence within this world. A person that acts with all the attributes of God, we look at him, and even in our subconscious, we'll refer to him as a real man. And on the other hand, you'll have another man that's standing right next to him. It looks maybe identical, but he's dirty. He's rude. He eats with his hands. He does what he wants. He's not dressed properly. He's screaming. He's being arrogant. He's insulting. You look at him, and the first thing that comes to mind, you say, wow, this man is a real animal. He's acting like an animal. He is not representing what he should be representing. And that is what? So you can say a person, or I could say in different terms, an image of God. Where we see that even within us, amongst us, we could either act in a way that represents God, that represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will in which we should be designed in, or we could represent ourselves in a way of an animalistic, not being the presence of God, not showing what God is supposed to be. He said, maybe we can say that now we're getting very close to understanding what BEIT was. BEIT was a place that anyone that sinned came to. What is this idea of sin? The idea of sin is that a person had a little voice in his ear that said, you know what? You're not supposed to be honorable. Take extra from your partner. It's fine. No one sees. Or in other words, lack of honor, lack of truth, lack of honesty, lack of an Adam, lack of what represents man and what represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That person listened to a voice. That voice wasn't a voice of representing God and all what God installed within us, but rather it represented animalistic instinct. A person that stole, like an animal that takes what he sees when he's hungry. A person that sins represents a person that was led and followed the desire of the animalistic instinct that exists within him. That person gets up and decides that for all these weeks or all these years or whatever period of time, he's acted like an animal. Not that, God forbid, we're insulting him, but rather he listened to an animalistic voice within him. And he wants to end this. And he wants to return to honor, to gratitude, to respect, to representing what God created within this world. The Torah says, it's very simple. You bring an animal, you come to BEIT Hamikdash. It says that they would take this animal, he would hold the animal's head, put his head against it, and he would do vidui. What is vidui? Vidui is essentially asking for sorry. A part of this vidui was that this person would announce, say, Hashem, I followed the animal that is within me. The animal within me leaded me to places that I don't want to be. It's not me. I am an Adam. I am a person. I don't want to act out of instinct, out of desire, and out of lust, and out of stinginess, and out of selfishness. I want to be an Adam. So Hashem, end this animalistic part of me. Kill it here. My throat should be slit instead of his. But as a result of that, let me live here in Adam. Let me leave this place and be a true representation of an image of God. He says, after that sacrifice was brought, that person would leave Bet HaMikdash. He would enter as a person that doesn't represent Hashem, that doesn't hold Hashem's presence with him, and he would exit in Adam. He would exit a man. He would exit a person that is able to hold and represent Hashem's honor. We said, maybe we can say, according to all we just looked at, Bet HaMikdash wasn't the house of Hashem. By far. Rather, Bet HaMikdash was a factory to create the house of Hashem. If we think of this idea of what truly occurred with the Korban, it wasn't that the house of Hashem made a change. It's rather that now the house of Hashem could be within the person. It's even in the name of the word Korban. Korban, in Hebrew, comes from the root of leit karev, to come close. That when you bring a sacrifice, when you bring a Korban, you are close to Hashem. You take a step forward to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What Bet HaMikdash was not a house of dwelling. It was rather a house that creates the place in which Hashem could dwell in. Whether it be the animals, whether it be the bread, and more importantly, us, Bnei Adam. The house of Hashem was never the building, was never Bet HaMikdash. It was always supposed to be us. We don't need the building for Hashem's presence to be with us. We need to understand that we are the representation of Hashem. We need to carry Hashem's image and carry Hashem's presence and carry Hashem's name throughout the world and to represent Him properly. That's what was the job of Bet HaMikdash. And we see this even very clearly in the past of how Bet HaMikdash and the Mishkan came to be. It says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was taking Bnei Yisrael out of Egypt, obviously now that we understand this idea, the last step to bring them out of Egypt was what? It was a Korban. It was a sacrifice. Now it makes sense. Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach they did the night before, they ate it in a rush and they left Egypt. Because they need to completely kill that animalistic side that they were with all those years. Put that aside. Now that they were clean, around Har Sinai, the Zohar HaKadosh says very bluntly, Hashem's initial thought was to rest amongst us. That's why even later on it says, Bnei Yisrael, they were like one heart. We were one vessel to receive Hashem's presence. We were one body to receive Hashem's descending down to the world. Right after Bnei Yisrael surrounded around the mountain, we all know what famously happened, where Bnei Yisrael sinned with the golden calf. Right after the sin, the Torah says, not even Zohar now, that Hashem came to Moshe. It said, Moshe, we have a big ba'aya, we have a big problem. What's the big problem? The problem being that initially I wanted to rest amongst Bnei Israel, amongst my Adams, and get amongst my people. But my people followed a leader which was an animal. Well, we know that the whole concept of the golden calf wasn't just to build a statue. It was that they were truly trying to find a leader. They were truly trying to find a source of leadership in which they can follow, in which they can walk in. The Torah says that Hashem told Moshe that your children, Bnei Israel, dirtied their hearts. And now that they dirtied their hearts, I can't rest amongst them. So Hashem brought forward a solution. And that solution being what? That solution being the Mishkan. That solution being Bet HaMikdash. Where Hashem said, now that if I will build a Bet HaMikdash, I will build a Mishkan, Bnei Israel will not need to become the home of God. But rather now they can come to a cleaning in order to become the home of God. Where Bet HaMikdash's use and purpose wasn't to be a home for Hashem. It was rather to make us clean and worthy to become once again what we were always supposed to be, which was the home of Hashem. Bet HaMikdash's purpose was only that. And the proof of that is that it's not here. There's even Mefarshim that say that Bet HaMikdash was a failure. And which is a failure for a simple reason, that even though it was made to keep our hearts pure, we were still sinning. So Hashem said, if it's not doing its job, then get rid of it. Destroy it, move it out of the way. Let's try something else. Bet HaMikdash is not and was not the house of Hashem. Bet HaMikdash is only a tool in order that we can come to a place of cleaning ourselves to become the house of Hashem, to represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to hold HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, to have Hashem dwelling and living amongst us. Bet HaMikdash, Rabotai, is not needed to have Hashem within our world. We are what's needed. If Bet HaMikdash was needed, he would ask Adam to build it, he would ask Abraham to build it, he would ask Yaakov to build it. It wasn't necessary at that time. It was only necessary when it was a failed project that didn't work out. The idea of Hashem's home in which he can dwell in is not a building. It was never a building, and according to many Zohar, I'm not going to get into right now, will not be a building. Rather, it will only be us, Bnei Israel, Bnei Adam. We don't need Rabotai to wait. We don't need to have this glorious, magical saving by Mashiach or whatever it is for Hashem to have a presence and for Hashem to be amongst us. What we need is to understand that we need to bring Him down within our own life, within our own beings, and make ourselves worthy in order to come to a place of having His presence bestowed upon us. The house of Hashem is each and every one of us. We just need to understand that it's in our hands to invite HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to bring Him within our life, to act in the exact same way that we would need to act in order for us to be a proper representation of Him. And only once we will be able to do so, we'll come to a place of having the house of Hashem within our lives.